it's so much more than just communications. It's about making a difference in people's lives, and having those tangible things is just kind of a win for everybody.
Welcome to Modern Gov Matters. I'm Sarah Lloyd. This podcast is for people who work in government communications and civic engagement, especially at the local level. We're here to talk about what's actually working and what's clearly not. No fluff, no generic success stories, just honest conversations with people in the trenches. Modern Gov Matters is presented by Civol, powered by Social News Desk. Today, I'm talking with Kara Roberson, Strategic Communications Officer for the City of Wentzville, Missouri. Kara describes her role this way. I'm passionate about public service, and at its core, my job is about connection. My goal is to translate what local government does into clear, useful information so our community feels included, stays in the loop, and understands how to stay informed and engaged. Kara was named 3CMA's 2022 Communicator of the Year and has more than 20 years in the public sector. But what I really want to talk about today is how her three-person team went from survival mode to strategic powerhouse. Kara, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, I'm really excited.
Can you tell us a little bit about Wentzville for folks who don't know?
Sure. So Wentzville is a suburb of St. Louis, and we have about 50,000 residents now, grows pretty rapidly. We were the fastest growing city for a couple of decades. I think that's kind of slowed a little bit, but we still kind of take that claim to fame. We are kind of the westernmost edge, so we tend to have a little bit of that westward expansion mode where people are still wanting to move out a little bit further away and still feel like they're kind of out on the outskirts. It's a great place to be. Lots of economic development activity happening, lots of room for growth still. We're at about, like I said, 50,000, but with plans to be closer to 80 at some point. So we've still got some room to grow.
Yeah, definitely some room to grow. And you described your day-to-day to me as a mix of everything. Some days strategic, some days very much in the moment troubleshooting. And so what does that actually look like for you?
Well, I think just to kind of back up from that a minute, one of the things that I love about my job is how well it mirrors what I learned to do, what I went to school for. So I actually have an integrated marketing communications degree, and that touched on all of these things from website to video to writing to editing to putting out fires and PR and all that good thing. But I think really, so that's what I love is that like I'm never bored. There's never time to be bored, but I'm also never bored because we live in such a digital age and there's always something new to touch and be part of. It's really hard sometimes to be as proactive as we would like to be. So I love to live in that strategic space more if I could. That's like in my top Clifton strengths. So I think maybe my number one is strategic, but I don't get to live in that space very often. We often have to be more reactive, and putting out fires is certainly part of the job. But I think it's good. It's a good balance.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned to me before the podcast that your residents are kind of shifting toward wanting visual transparency. They want you to show them, not just tell them. And you're in the show me state, of course. So
Right.
what is that changing? What is that changing about your work day to day?
I think so for us, it's kind of had a little bit of that shift from print to digital, although we also operate in a community that very much still likes to hold their information. So they like their newsletters. They're not letting go of those things at time and time again. When we look at community surveys and things like that, they still want that. But from a visual transparency standpoint, we have to be able to show them things in those digital spaces where they are every day, whether that's through a reel or through some type of infographic or just a social media post in general. They really want to see their tax dollars in action and they want to understand that a little bit more. So we've opted for things like behind the scenes, or today we're shooting a video with the mayor that is about like he switches roles. So he'll switch roles with a person in our community development department,
That's so
kind of give
cool.
people like a backstory. And we've done that 2 or 3 times with other departments just to kind of it gives him a lot of perspective, but it also just gives our community a little bit more in depth what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys do a ton with Reels. Can you talk to me a little bit about kind of the shift that took place that kind of brought that on and had Reels as part of your overall strategy?
So we were not really strong in video for a long time, but part of that was because I started in this department as a part-time person. It was just me part-time for several years. And then we brought on one, I went full-time and then we brought on another full-time. When we were able to bring on that third full-time person, we really were able to be a bit more strategic with We need digital happening here, social media happening here. We need a video presence. We knew that was something we needed to be on, but we really didn't know how much that was going to kind of take over some of our
Yeah.
strategy because it just performs so well. So I think we just kind of hit the sweet spot where that engagement on things like reels, and we're not on TikTok, but that type of formatting has just become so much what people want to consume. And so that has helped us be able to kind of tell our story in the space where they are already. That's not to, discount the 27 other different ways that we also communicate, but that we just kind of saw how well that did and said, okay, let's just take a jump with that. And we've really leaned into our social strategy for reels.
Yeah, and I know I follow you guys on Facebook, even though I'm down in Texas, but I see your content all the time. It's definitely being surfaced. So, speaking of Facebook, let's talk about one of your biggest frustrations, which is the rapid spread of misinformation in unregulated community Facebook groups. What does that battle against misinformation look like for you guys?
I think a lot of times it just looks like people just not knowing the full story. And so sometimes we'll take that personally, like we haven't told the story correctly or in the right ways or used the right avenue. And so we really utilize that information, that misinformation that's happening to kind of shift gears and maybe push information out to help fill in those gaps. One of the things we do with social media is we don't respond on our own content unless it actually inaccurate or we're trying to provide content information or just answer a legitimate question. But we really don't do anything in those unregulated groups. We just kind of observe. And that's kind of twofold. First, we would be doing that constantly. If we were in there, we'd have to be, especially when we're in different seasons of the year where things are more heightened or there's more political things going on, we would have to kind of be in there constantly, and we don't want to do that. That's
Right.
a
That's a
detriment to
full-time job.
ourselves and our mental health for sure, but
Yeah.
also just time. But we don't want our residents to feel like there's a big brother aspect. So we just utilize it as a way to kind of keep our pulse on what's happening. We know what's going on. We're aware of whatever conversations are taking place so that if we need to react, we can, or if we need to just keep our teams and directors or the mayor informed of the conversations, we can also do that. So it's a little bit of push and pull because sometimes we'd like to be like, oh no, that's totally wrong. But we also know that's not our place, but that we do have other avenues to try to tell our story or spread information that is right.
Yeah, spread that correct information. Yeah, and that's great that you guys use that kind of social listening technique to inform, maybe future communications and make sure that you're covering your bases as far as what the information actually is. And maybe it's just a lack of information out there. So, over the last year, you mentioned that you guys transitioned your three-person team into kind of an internal agency model where each person is a dedicated account manager for specific departments. Can you tell me what prompted that shift?
So it was a little bit of what I spoke to earlier with that adding that third person. Once we had that third person in and knew what we wanted her goals and her strategy to be, we also needed to figure out how that played with the rest of the team. And what we were noticing is that there were a lot of times when a department, for instance, would just reach out to all three of us. Well, that's great. Now we all know what's going on and that's good. But at the same time, like, I don't know if somebody else is responding or if somebody else is taking the lead on that. We use a project management software to track a lot of that as well. But one of the things we wanted to do was to just be a bit more personal. And this allows us to kind of build those relationships. So we basically identified groups that we were already working with. And of course, you can reach out to any and all of us, but we want you to have that point person that can get to know you better. So we've set up one-on-one meetings with those groups to kind of help them throughout the year to see, like, plan ahead and figure out what they're going to need our help on. But also it just gives us that really like focused approach so that we can learn more about those departments and then we can better help them to spread their message and get the message out there.
Yeah, and I love that because it really gives, maybe some underserved departments a seat at the table that they might not have had otherwise as far as access to communications and being able to get their message out. So that's a really cool model. For small teams who are listening, how do you guys make this work?
With our small team, and I realize that we're probably still bigger than some because I have been there where we were just the one or two person team, but the agency approach has allowed us really to structure our days a little bit better. We know what we're focusing on. We know we're then also responsible for helping like put those newsletters and other content together that each person is working on. So we can take mine's a bad example because I do internal services, but Abby can be focused really heavily on slab replacement because she's working with that engineering team and she'll know exactly what needs to then be carried out into a newsletter or something else that somebody else is working on because she knows she's in tune to what is important to that department and what we might need to elevate or prioritize. So I think that's what it does for us. It helps us kind of pinpoint those priorities and then also where those pain points are so that we know like what we might need to be analyzing looking forward or what we might need to come back to later in the year because this particular thing is going to be a problem.
You told me that if you were starting over, you'd build a strategic roadmap and formalize your workflows much sooner, even when you were part time. And then you said, I spent so much energy just trying to keep my head above water that it felt like I didn't have the luxury of being strategic. But I've since realized that the real hurdle wasn't a lack of time, it was a lack of structure. So, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think like it goes back to that idea that you have to make time. You don't have time to do these things. So I always felt like I didn't have time to be strategic because I was doing so much more in the moment, so many things that had to be checked off and taken care of that there was no time to really think through these things. But really, now that I'm where I am now, and now that there are three of us, and now that I live in a space where in my role I can be more strategic because I'm not in the weeds as much as the rest of the team is. I think I'm like I should have just made the time. I should have just stopped what I was doing to make the time to be more strategic because even if in that moment I had been able to do more of a project management approach or even I couldn't have done agency style because I'm the only client rep, but I could have approached things differently to really help those teams figure out or those departments kind of figure out where the ebb and flow was. I think I just could have been, again, I'm always really a proponent of being more proactive than reactive. And I just think it took me a minute to figure out that I could be more proactive. I just needed to kind of take a different approach and really take the time to concentrate on that.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're drowning, it just feels like I don't have time, but investing that time can
Yep.
really alleviate the problem and make things
Exactly.
easier down the road.
Yeah. And if you
Yeah.
can find other ways and other tools and other things to kind of take that for you, I think that's why I really enjoyed finding a project management tool or finding a social media management tool because then I could kind of that part was just easier. It wasn't as heavy of a lift and I could be like, okay, that piece is done and now I can operate in a more proactive space.
Yeah. For folks listening, can you talk a little bit about the tools that are making your life easier right now?
Well, certainly Monday.com, which is what we use for project management. We've been through a couple different ones, but now we actually use that citywide. So
Mhm.
everyone is on Monday.com and it helps us really make sure that we are all on the same page. It helps from a time management, but just also just like a you can visually see what's going on. I can assign tasks to my team. I can assign tasks to our interns and just having that ability to kind of have conversations in that space too so that we're not having to have a meeting. I'm not having a chat and I'm not having a separate email. It's all living in one spot. So that I think really helps the flow work a lot better. And then also social news desk for sure really helps Abby to help us make sure that she has time for other things and not just spending all of her time on social and all of her time on scheduling, especially as we move into all of the ADA changes and things that are rolling out, having the ability to just add alt tags right there and not have to do some of the other workflow things that we were doing that were taking up more time. We use a great website right now that's all WordPress based
Mhm.
which really, like, we were a little unsure about at first, but we don't do everything ourselves. We rely on our teams to populate their own information because we look at them as being the subject matter experts. But because of that, this setup in WordPress is really easy for them. You don't have to be tech savvy. You don't have to know about websites. We can just make it easy across the board. So I think those are our probably three top tools that help us be more efficient and effective in what we're doing so that again we have time to do some of those other things.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned your interns, and you also shared a really beautiful moment with me before the podcast. So, can you tell me about your high school intern who just got hired onto the city full time?
Yeah, so we actually have participated in a high school intern partnership with the state Charles County, which is the county that Wentzville's in, but all of the state Charles County high schools. And so we've had probably upwards of 10 interns over the last 6 or 7 years that we've been participating, and they've all been great in their own ways. We actually try really hard to kind of take as many as we can because it's just something that we really feel passionate about from not from necessarily even a communication standpoint or like getting things off of our plates. It's really more about introducing them to local government. And that's just something that's really important to me. And it's something that's really important to my department. So we had an intern a couple of years ago. She was a high school intern through this program. She was our communications intern. And then she went to a local university and came back to our parks team as a paid college intern. And now she has since been hired full time as in January as their marketing and communications coordinator. So it's really great. And she told us kind of in between this process. I think she was still in college that she really had not even thought about local government. And now that was really important to her. Like she wanted to be able to get back into that and find a way. And so we're really not only excited that she's back in local government, but that she's in Wentzville.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that you could kind of kindle that enthusiasm in her and introduce her to something that, she didn't even know maybe was an option before. So that's really cool. What would you say that says about the work that you guys are doing beyond just communications?
I think just back to that, like the local government piece and the public service piece, those are things that we bring up in conversations a lot. I think it's something that you can learn, but I also think it's something that you just kind of come by naturally or you don't. I kid and say that I really tried not to be in public service because my whole family was in state, local, or county public service in Texas, in fact. And I was like, no thanks, I'm good. But then my mom just was like, oh, you should apply for this one job. So here we are 18 years later or so and only doing local government. So I think it's just like we just want to make sure that this profession is recognized and elevated as much as it can be and that people recognize that it's not just like we're not just getting you to pay your utility bill. There's so much else happening behind the scenes and so these are things that we try to bring up in lots of conversations like these and at conferences and different things that it's so much more than just communications. It's about making a difference in people's lives and having those tangible things is just kind of a win for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So before we go, it's time for some rapid fire questions. What's your favorite local spot in Wentzville?
Duke's barbecue by far. It's
Love barbecue.
delicious.
You're going to make me hungry. What's the most underrated part of your community?
I think probably our parks and trail system, although they're getting a lot of love these days. We've got a master plan going into place. We've bought some additional parkland, but I think that sometimes people forget that they're out there because our lives are busy. But we're trying to make those more prominent and give people some reason to get outside and enjoy the weather that surely we're going to have soon.
Yeah, spring is on the way for sure. All right. If Wentzville had a theme song, what would it be?
We are the crossroads of the nation, and we're really positioned well for logistics in terms of people getting to us by highway, and we've got railway and all of those good things. So we really lean into that crossroads connection a bit. So I think, yeah, that would definitely be our theme song, connecting at the crossroads.
Yeah. And what's your advice for someone just starting out in government communications?
Think just get as much information you can from as many people as you can. Get involved in groups like 3CMA and Tamio and other groups that are out there that are positioned to help you succeed and find yourself a mentor. Think that I've learned just as much from my mentee as I have from my mentor, but I think just, yeah, connect with people and you'll learn a lot and you'll learn that your city is not crazy. I mean, I think that's what it really helps you understand.
Yeah, I always notice that so much, like when I go to 3CMA or GSM Con or anything like that. There's always this sense of, oh my gosh, you are experiencing this thing that
Yeah.
I'm experiencing. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy.
Exactly what you need. You need that community so that you know you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, why is local government the most impactful place for a communicator to work?
I think it's because you see those immediate benefit to the community. You see them have a light bulb moment, or you see them just understand that we have this service or we offer this free program or there's all these amenities that maybe they don't know about. I think especially like from a new resident perspective, which we get to encounter quite a bit because we are a growing city. I think it's just really encouraging to see how people connect with their community and learn so much about the different services that we provide. We're not full service. We don't have our own electric or library or any of that, which a lot of cities that I've worked for and others do. But I think we still get to make a direct impact, even if we are just helping your water flow or making sure your toilet flushes. So just being behind the scenes and helping people understand how all that operates, I think it's fulfilling.
And last but not least, where can people follow you, follow your work, follow what's going on in Wentzville?
We are at Wentzville Mo on almost every outlet, Instagram and Facebook for sure. And then certainly connect with us on LinkedIn as well.
All right. That's Kara Roberson from the city of Wentzville, Missouri. Thank you so much for being so honest with us, Kara. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with your friends and colleagues. I've been your host, Sarah Lloyd, and this is Modern Gov Matters, presented by Civol, powered by Social News Desk. You can check out more episodes at moderngovmatters.com, and we'll see you with a new episode in a couple of weeks.